Hey, it's Mr. Marshall. It's Tony Lane again. I'm coming to you because I want to read a book with you today. It's a nonfiction book. I know your class has been studying nonfiction books, and so I want to do a little read aloud work with you. Okay. So the book we're going to look at today is this one. It's called The Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution by Melissa McDaniel. And this is a book, just like with all nonfiction books, you're starting the book off and kind of like wondering, what do you already know about it? And you're going to think about all the stuff you don't know. So I'm going to sort of just think about this before I even start. The Industrial Revolution, I know it was a part of American history, but honestly, I'm not this big expert on it. I know that it had to do with factories and it had to do with technology, but it was a long time ago. So it's not the kind of technology that we have today, but a lot of stuff was invented, right? So what I don't know is like exactly what kinds of inventions were made, because I just don't know. I don't know. They're probably stuff that would seem kind of old right now, right? Because there was no internet then. There was no, you know, electricity was probably even like not that common. And so I know that it's probably going to seem like really modern for their times. And it probably changed the world a lot, but it's going to be different than if we had an industrial revolution today. So let's look. The Industrial Revolution, I'm going to do a little reading and let's think about it. So it starts with chapter 1 is called Into the Factory. Okay, so let's go. Into the Factory. In 1771, a large brick building 5 stories high was erected along the River Derwent in Derbyshire in the Midlands of England. It was called Cromford Mill. So right now I can tell this is starting with a story. So when we read a story inside of a nonfiction book, the story helps us to kind of get into the mood. It helps us learn a lot of information by being there. Okay, so I'm going to try and put myself there, right? So listen to it again. In 1771, a large brick building 5 stories high, okay, big building, was erected along the River Derwent in Derbyshire in the Midlands of England. So we're in England now, right? It's 1771. It tells us, and we're in England. Each day, 200 workers trudged through the front gate just before 6 a.m. Wow, 200 workers before 6 a.m. Like it's still dark outside and 200 people are there working. Wow. Many of those workers were women. Many children, some as young as 7 years old. 7 years old? That's like a first grader is going off to work in a factory at 6 o'clock in the morning with 200 other people. It says they spent 12 hours tending machines that spun cotton into yarn. As they left at 6 p.m., 200 more women and children passed through the gate to work through the night shift. So wow, that means, let me write a little bit. I'm going to be thinking that in this, they came in at 6 a.m. and they went home at 6 p.m. That's 12 hours. Okay. And there were 200 workers, and there were men, there were women, and there were kids. 7 years old. That's crazy, right? So all these people are going there so early, and there's so many of them. And then 12 hours later, there was another shift. There was a night shift that was just the same. Wow. So that can't be a fun job. I know I couldn't do it for 12 hours. And it was probably really hot in there and all those people and wow, let's keep going. Small steps is the next part. So right now, the next part of this chapter is called small steps. So that's making me think that I'm going to learn about some of the like details of like working in the factory. So it says, the Industrial Revolution was not the result of a single inventor or a single invention. In the middle of the 1700s, many inventors were working on solving the same problems. Great, because that's what technology does. It's meant to make your life easier. It's meant to solve problems. One of their main concerns was speeding up the process of making yarn and cloth. On a traditional loom, okay, that's a really, really inventory kind of word, right? On a traditional loom, all weaving was done by hand. On a traditional loom, the weaving was done by hand. The weaver, I know that's a word because I know people whose last name is Weaver, so they must have had weavers in their family. But I'm not quite sure what a weaver really does. The weaver held a shuttle that contained yarn, passing it over and under the rows of yarn held by the loom. So it's got a picture here that's going to help me. You see that? That must be the loom, because this whole thing is what the book is talking about. It's what the author's talking about. So look at this picture. I'm going to reread what that says. It says, on a traditional loom, all weaving was done by hand. The weaver held a shuttle that contained yarn, passing it over and under. So I'm thinking the shuttle is the thing that brings it over and under these rows of yarn. Okay. Under the rows of yarn held by the loom. So I'm going to make a sketch of that so I can kind of understand it. So I'm not going to sketch everything. I'm just going to sketch the rows of yarn, right? Do you see that? That's my yarn. That's in rows. I'm not drawing the whole loom. I'm just drawing this part. So like I'm imagining that the shuttle, whatever that looks like, kind of goes over this row and under this row and over this row and under this row. Yeah, I've heard people say that's weaving. Like in art class, we talk about how that's weaving, right? That must be how it works. Let's keep going. In 1733, John Kay invented the instrument called the flying shuttle. That sounds very technical, so I'm going to write that down. I know because there's a date there, 1733, and his name was John Kay, and it says he invented an instrument called the flying shuttle. So I'm going to put that all in one box because that goes together. That's information that goes together. If I had an index card, I could write it all on the same card in 1733. So I'm going to try and talk about this using all its parts. Okay, so let's see. In 1733, somebody named John Kay invented something called a flying shuttle. And since this is about the loom, it must be something. Oh, the shuttle was the thing that moved the yarn up and down, over and under the rows, right? Let's read a little bit more. The weaver did not have to hold the flying shuttle. Instead, the flying shuttle was attached to the loom and the weaver controlled it with a lever. So that made it easier because I guess the shuttle that they used here, they had to actually use their hands to do, right? But not anymore because of this guy, John Kay. Let's see. The next major improvement in the textile industry took place in 1764, another date, when James Hargreaves developed the spinning jenny. This machine allowed workers to spin cotton into thread much more quickly. So I'm going to make another box here. 1764, James Hargreaves, spinning jenny. I'm putting that in a box. You see that? I made a box with that information because I know it goes together. So I'm going to say it all again. All the stuff from the box, I'm going to say together. So in 1764, James Hargreaves created something called a spinning jenny, but I don't know what that is yet. So let's read on and find out. This machine allowed workers to spin cotton into thread much more quickly. Interesting. So I guess these three things really, the loom had a shuttle, but now the flying shuttle that John Kay invented in 1733 made it easier because the weaver didn't have to hold the shuttle. I'm going to write that word down because we keep using it. So I'm going to write it down, weaver. And I'm going to just write what I think it means. A weaver is someone who makes yarn. And I'm going to try and use these words, right? I'm going to try and use these words: loom, spinning jenny, like these very, very weaving kind of words. Shuttle. So now as I talk, I'm going to really push myself to use these words, because that's what I do when I read nonfiction, is I try to use the words about my topic. So here we go. In 1733, John Kay created a flying shuttle because when weavers used a loom to make yarn, they used to use a part called the shuttle, which would take the wool over and under and over and under and over and under, right? And so John Kay made that easier because he invented a flying shuttle, so people wouldn't have to hold it in their hands. It just went on its own, right? And then in 1764, this other guy, James Hargreaves, created something called a spinning jenny, to make the cotton into thread much more quickly. Do you see what I'm doing? I'm talking about this like hard content, this hard information, and I'm using these boxes of information that go together, and I'm using all the words I have about this topic, right, to kind of hold my idea together. Okay, so that's how I'm holding on to this really hard information. So we're going to stop reading now. And while you're reading some hard nonfiction books, you can do some of the things that we just did today. You can write down the words about the topic. That can be like an anchor for you. You can have boxes of information that go together. You can make a sketch and talk about it. And then when you're kind of done, you can retell it all by using all those parts. And that'll help you learn this really hard information that you're reading in your nonfiction. Okay? Try that workout, and I'll see you next time.